is Harold H.B. Bell in Autism Parent Care, and we're here talking about autism and making it easy for you to understand. The Spectrum is a weekly podcast broadcast that we're giving information. I'm alongside here with Dr. Jane Yip, the founder of Autism Parent Care, and we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for parents and loved ones with children on the spectrum to have some information that they can take. And we were talking the last segment, Dr. Jane, the parent-to-parent dynamic after they find out that their child is going to need special needs for the rest of their life. What can be done about parent-to-parent relationships when they have a special need child? Because we've mentioned in the last broadcast so many different things that happen in the dynamic between the two individuals. What can we do?
Okay, first of all, this is touching on couples relationship, right? They tend to forget that they are a couple because all of a sudden the attention is being drawn to a crisis. Mm-hmm. And in fact, some of them forgot that they are a couple.
Maybe, I don't know if they forget they're a couple. I think what happens when you're a couple is you go into that merger thinking about you and that other person. And then when this new person is introduced and they're going to require some things to take both of you now out of your comfort zone, now we're going to see how really strong you being a couple is. And that's where we are right now, because when parents find this out, that couple finds it out, the whole dynamic of their marriage, the whole reason they met is going to change.
Exactly. Yes.
And so give some people some information that they need to know about this dynamic and how we can start, defending instead of just wilting and succumbing to.
Exactly. So now, first of all, I want to say I'm no expert on relationship, couples relationships. So this is more along the line of strategic thinking than relationship advice, right? So what I would like to say is, you know what? There must be a reason why you are attracted to each other. Why don't we start there? Why did you get together in the first place? So because that's something positive. Obviously, there is something positive for the two of you to get together, I would think, right? So let's visit that question.
I think we need to visit that question, because some of those questions could be, I'm interested in sports, you're interested in sports. I like to travel, you like to travel. So a lot of the things that we're getting together for, Jane, just to me, and I'm not one to go into relationships, but they're superficial. And then when you have to, rubber meets the road, and you have to deal with, okay, we bore this child together. And now this child's going to have special needs, and all the reasons you came together were kind of superficial. I imagine that will cause some havoc in that relationship trying to raise a special need child.
That's right. So all the common interest, joint interest goes out the window, right? So what do you do next? So I suggest that if they can afford it, go to a relationship counselor, and mainly to facilitate communication, right? Now, I think that, again, I'm not an expert in that. It's more kind of a common sense thing. If you are to talk to each other, you've got to have some kind of connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the first place, right?
And us communicated, I guess the one thing I was trying to figure out when you said that, and just, like I said, trying to make this easy for the listener is, I don't even know if we have an expert in relationships because the relationship world is so dynamic. I don't know if anybody can pinpoint everything anyway. And so you have to kind of go on feeling on what it is to you. And I guess there is a bubble of things that are included in a good relationship.
Correct. And not blaming the other person.
Absolutely.
If as soon as you sit down, you blame the other person for not doing this, that, and the other, then you will not be able to communicate, right?
Now, as I'm listening, I'm just looking at the list of things that you have where people can help themselves and some of the ways that we can fend off these problems and issues. And I'm just looking particularly at agreeing to talk about uncomfortable things. And sometimes we forget communication is simple. It's simple, but it's difficult because sometimes the exchange means you have to hear things about you that you don't like.
Exactly.
And vice versa. So when we're talking about this problem that we have about this 24/7, our life has changed forever. How do we talk about that to maintain the togetherness, but then also be able to get everything out that you need to get out so you can move forward?
Yeah, and then this is why I would suggest going to a relationship counselor. They can act like a referee. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy to do, but humility is good. Humility means you don't know it all, you agree with that. And if both of them agree to be humble, to say we come into that, I really don't know. I need you. That's a difficult statement to say.
Yeah, because the
I need you here.
that vulnerable state makes us so weak. I mean, we just feel so, I don't know why we don't like to be vulnerable and let our true feelings out, but it is one of the most uneasy feelings of people in this world. You know, you have to be vulnerable and out there almost naked.
It's easier to say I love you than I need you.
You know, one of the things I'm looking at too is that we were mentioning earlier about managing time and taking time for self when you're dealing with this 24/7, 365. And some of the things that we're introducing on the spectrum, you might not know about it because these aren't common terms in the everyday world, but you've got on here respite care. And respite is RESPITE. Look it up, Google it please, because it can save your world if you're out there in your family or if you're a parent who just needs a break. Talk about the importance of making sure that you get some respite care in your home or off-site to where you get a chance to recalibrate, reset, and be ready to deal with this task that you're dealing with every day.
Respite care is absolutely necessary. On an energy level, if you're running around looking after somebody all the time, physically you're going to be drained, right?
Yes.
On an emotional level, you're not being fed. So you need something emotionally to feed you, hopefully something productive and constructive, right?
Yes.
That's another respite. The other thing is for identity. You want to be a person, not just a caretaker of such and such person. Identity, right? So identity as who you are by yourself, identity of who you both are as a couple. Taking time alone and taking time together is necessary.
And one of the things, with that being said, kind of leading straight into that, is that we have to be better at managing time, even more so than your normal everyday person, because this could have you so scattered and so strung out if you don't make yourself a schedule, if you don't keep obligations and things in order, don't do too much, don't try to do too much because you'll burn yourself out. You got to get your rest. Talk about the importance of that.
Yes, burnout. Burnout is a real thing, and when people get burnt out, they're no longer able to think rationally, right? And then everything becomes reactive, and that's how people get into a fight, which is why it is worth the money and time and the extra preparation to pencil in time, managing time.
And stick to it.
Yes, sticking to it.
Sticking to it. It's almost like when you go to work, the reason you have a work schedule, because if they allowed everybody just to go to work, they show up at any time and nothing would get done. So, you know, this is no different than the real world, but it's paramount that I think parents need to get on their schedule and stick to it so they don't burn themselves out. You already mentioned about the counseling side. We talked about as soon as you find out, the earlier you can get counseling. That's how cliche it is, because I'm always talking about early diagnosis, early treatment. Same thing if you find out you have a child that is on the spectrum or any special needs child for that matter.
Same thing with marriage, early counseling, because look at it as a car with 4 tires on the road, right? You don't want to wait until the wheels come off before you go counseling.
Yeah. And
the wheels keep coming off, there are warning signs.
Yeah, and with that being said, Jane, this leads right into the next subject that I want you to talk about. After you go get that counseling, you realize things are different now. There's going to have to be a new bond, a new covenant. And that's not easy a lot of times when you fell in love with somebody for one reason, and now we have to go redo it. And I use the example of if someone who you love has a heart attack. Same thing. That person's not going to be the same after they come out of that heart attack. There's going to be some things different, and you have to renew that. So when we're talking about parents who understand this and they go on and get the counseling and they say, okay, we're going to stick together. When we make that new covenant and that new agreement to say we're going to stick together, how realistic should we be about the romance, all the things that most relationships encompass? How real are we going to have to be?
Well, personally, I think they still need romance, right? But they would have to create it. So it's like you've got to be more purposeful than that. The cliche that was in the past, right, may not work anymore. Yes, renewing the bond, renewing the covenant is great. They want to have a party to commemorate that, that's great too, to have friends and family support them. So they would have to look at their union differently.
Yeah.
It is possible if you, both of them,
Go in together. They have to go in together.
Yes.
And that takes me to this next point, this next bullet point that we have. And we see it all the time working with the children here. The parents that are the most indulged in their children together are the ones who stick it out and make it. So how important are both parents, finding out as much about their child and being part of their child and working with the therapist so they can get some relief and have some of the skills that we're giving here? How important is that going to be for them to come together tighter than ever now?
Absolutely. Sometimes a couple goes through challenges and come out at the other end, they get a deeper kind of love, which is better than just the superficial romance that they might have started off with. So if they work, they really support each other, I think it can be a beautiful relationship down the road.
And especially, like you said, the more you find out about your child, and that kind of leads me to the next bullet. I'm trying to bleed these things together because it makes sense. The realities of what can happen, and I've watched so many children on the spectrum. We've got artists around here. We've got people who are math wizards. And once the two parents decide we're going to commit to our child and then find out what makes that child's greatness happen. There are so many young autistic children who can go on and do phenomenal things. And so when we talk about realistic, I don't want to put a cap on realistic, but there's a reality to what happens when we can diagnose certain children. Talk about reality versus hope.
Yes. So that is an important subject, right? Reality is, basically we want them to be the best that they can be, right? Now, it will not be realistic to expect them to be a neurotypical because they are not, number one, right? And then it's between parent and child. Between parent and parent with your spouse, the reality is, yes, one's going to be stronger, one's going to be weaker, you cannot change them. But you can understand each other and you don't put too much on the other person's plate. That is reality.
Yeah.
Reality is also saying that, well, you know what, I just cannot do it this weekend. I mean, I need to be off, I don't know, doing hiking or whatever. I just cannot do it anymore.
Yes.
So that is realistic. So basically giving that space for everybody to maybe fall every now and then. Nobody can be a hero all the time.
And I would like to say this, just from working with some of the children and when we're mentioning realities, and we have so many parents who have dreams for their children, like, as you mentioned, walking down the aisle, getting married, going to college and doing all these things. And while that might not be their reality, the beautiful reality I get to live within is a child not being able to write their number or their letters. And then one week you come in and you say, write your name, and they write their name. Those are the hope that those are hope things that you can come away with and still feel good. If you limit your reality level a little bit, then find the hope in these beautiful things that happen with these children every day. One thing you have on there is practicing forgiveness. Jane, that is the toughest thing for all of us to do, and especially at this time we're dealing with right now. Forgiveness is the key word, but more importantly, between these two parents who are going to be going at each other every day, that's going to be the key word in their relationship, probably.
Yes, forgiveness for everything, really.
Do you think that there's some bit of angst between the two couples, wondering which one led more to, the unspoken elephant in the room, which one led more to this child being on the spectrum? Because I would imagine that would have to come in, and you thought you were the Mr. That and she was Mrs. That, and then who is the one who made this happen, since we don't know?
Yes, that's the elephant in the room. Guess what they say? The apple does not fall far from the apple tree. So if you are to produce a child on the spectrum or any other condition, right, it has to come from somewhere. And it is, now one parent may not have a full-blown symptoms, but have something called the endophenotype, which means features of these symptoms. Not very communicative, autistic-like, and and it makes the other party really frustrated when the other party, this is real story, finally sees, I see this is where the kid get it from.
And there we go back to that. You know, everybody's going to blame everybody for the problems that we have. And then that's just the nature of arguments, I guess. So winding up this segment, and this has been beautiful because the parents are the key in this. I mean, you know, children, we've got them covered here at Autism Parent Care. But these parents and how they interact with one another, how cohesive they are, and working with their child, loving their child. Warning signs. I know one of the warning signs for me when I'm upset is I quit talking. And so now I'm trying to consciously say, okay, when I notice I quit talking, then something's wrong.
Because you're meant to talk all the time.
I'm made to talk all the time. But with that being said, what should the parents do to know and avoid some of these things that they could, you know, the precursors to their dysfunction? How could the parents look out for that and be real keen on that so it doesn't get 4 to 5 layers deep versus 1 layer deep, and we can handle that and let's fix it?
Yes. Well, I think it starts with, how comfortable you feel with one another, right? That's that. And yeah, if you see a personality change, something is happening. And with marriage, if you're no longer intimate, I think that's a sign too.
And that's interesting though, because I imagine a lot of the intimacy is lost when you start putting that on the table, and this could be the result again.
And when you don't have intimacy between couples,
then it's lost anyway.
By definition, it's not a couple, right?
It's not a couple. Yeah. Interesting. Whew. That was deep.